Hey, Tabernacle, thank you so much for inviting us into your living room or wherever it is you happen to be watching us and worshiping with us this morning or evening, whatever time it is for you. Would you please worship with us?
nothing that you miss. If it's not beautiful yet, it's gonna be. There's no fear of fire that takes you by surprise. If it's not beautiful yet, it's gonna be. Yeah. I believe all that you start, you complete. From glory to glory, glory to glory. Yeah. I believe you never stop taking me. Glory to glory, glory to glory. Yeah. And I can see beyond 1,000 things gone wrong. If it's not finished yet, it's gonna be. And all that's unredeemed, and all that's still unseen. If it's not finished yet, it's gonna be. Yeah. And I believe all that you start, you complete. Glory to glory, glory to glory. Yeah. I believe you never stop taking me. Glory to glory, glory to glory. Yeah. Glory to glory, Jesus. And I will see it when I believe it. All my faith in you, all my faith in you. And I will see it when I believe it. All my faith in you, all my faith in you. And I will see it when I believe it. All my faith in you, all my faith in you. And I will see it when I believe it. All my faith in you, all my faith in you. Yeah. I believe all that you start, you complete. From glory to glory, from glory to glory. Yeah. And I believe you never stop taking me. From glory to glory, glory to glory. Yeah. And I believe all that you start, you complete. From glory to glory, from glory to glory. And I believe you never stop taking me. From glory to glory, from glory to glory, from glory to glory, from glory to glory.
Welcome. Man, getting 50 years old is a real thing. I have one job, hit the button. One job. Welcome to the Tabernacle. You fired up about that intro video? Yeah, get real fired up about it because we are starting a brand new series. And here at the Tabernacle, we love God's Word and we love to preach through books of the Bible. And I won't be the only one. There'll be different voices that are up here. But the reason that I want you to make sure that you really love it is because I don't know if you've noticed, that says Samuel. And if you've checked the Bible before, there's actually two books there's 1 Samuel and there's 2 Samuel. And we're going to do both of them. I hope Manastee's excited as well. If you do the math, you'll find out there are 55 chapters in 1 and 2 Samuel combined. Someone said, oh, are we going to be in this till Christmas? Maybe next Christmas. Come on, Tabernacle. That's what we're about, right? So it's going to be good, I hope. I'm super excited. I haven't seen our staff this excited. We're nerds that way, right? We start a new series, it's the book of the Bible, and everyone's like, ooh, it's like Christmas. I don't know what it's about. But I'm fired up. I'm glad you're here. My name's John. I'm one of the pastors. And if you don't have a Bible, we'd love to get you a Bible here in Manistee or wherever you're at. If you want to pick out your own, that's fine too. But we're big fans of the Bible. You're going to need one as we go through this series. And as I've said before, when we go through a series, it's probably most profitable if you read ahead. I was telling Pastor Ben before the service that I intend on incentivizing my children to read ahead, right? And they think I'm made of money anyways, so we'll probably use money. Don't tell them I said that. I'm going to see if they'll do that on their own, but that's the plan. But for all of us to get the most out of it, it's helpful just to find a Bible, find 1 Samuel. If you're always kind of a chapter ahead, then it just kind of helps not surprise you when we get into some of the stuff. So by way of introduction, I want to just jump in. We could spend an entire sermon just giving you the thematic elements and the major characters and the themes and the epistemology. No, we're going to do it the way we read the Bible. We're going to jump in. With one little caveat. I'm going to start by telling you that this first chapter, chapter 1, I've entitled this message, The Last Judge. The Last Judge. And the reason is we have to put it in context of where we are. If you know the general story of the Bible, the story of human history, and the reason I say that, I used to be a history teacher, and that's the way I always began when I was in a school that would allow me to say this. If you look at the word history, it starts out with an H-I-S, because that's exactly what human history is. It's his story. It's his story. You know, we study U.S. history, we study world history, but all of it is his story. It's a story that's unfolding. And his story, we're part of that story because it began with our first parents. And the book of Genesis opens with our first parents believing the lie that God was holding out on them and that they deserved better, and they took what was not theirs. And all of sin and all suffering and all evil invaded at that point. If you continue to read through the Bible, generations later, there's a man named Abram. God changed his name to Abraham. And he was a man who believed God by faith. He didn't have a Bible. He's a big character in the Bible. But God spoke to him. And God made promises to Abraham. And also to Abraham's son Isaac, and to his son Jacob. And the essential part of the promise for us was that all nations would be blessed through his offspring. And the Hebrew nation was born. Israel, the Hebrews, the Jewish people, all descendants, the sons and daughters of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And those promises were renewed over and over again. And you know the story, God's people end up enslaved in Egypt for over 400 years. And God sent them a Savior. The Savior's name was Moses. And Moses led them out of Egypt and a bunch of other escapades that we don't have time to talk about. God promised them this land, and it was a promise he'd made to Abraham. And he promised them this land, that in this land they would be blessed, and from their offspring they would bless all the nations of the world. Then Moses died, and his right-hand man named Joshua led the people into the promised land. And in the promised land, God was going to be their God, and they were going to worship him in a way that no other nation worshiped or governed themselves. They were to follow God's law. They were to trust in his provision. They were to trust in his promises through, or what they call the covenants. But the problem is those people are just like us. Or maybe the problem is we're just like those people. Everyone starts doing what is right in their own eyes. When we went through the book of Judges, you remember some of the horrible, horrible things that happened to the people of Israel and how they would turn away from this one true God that had made those promises, who they believed, who had set them free, who had given them the land, and they would worship idols. And then God would raise up a savior, a judge, men like Gideon, women like Deborah. Remember Ehud, Barak, Jephthah, the big one, Samson. But for those of you that were here, and by the way, it's okay if you weren't, we have this awesome website that you could go to and go back in the catalog, and especially if you spend a lot of time in the car, you could play catch up this week, right? So you can kind of go back and see this, this is the sequel to that prequel. You do it on Amazon Prime. Where Judges ended wasn't in a good spot. And so as we start the books of Samuel, there's an overlap. Does that make sense? I think that's important for us to keep in mind. It's important for us to keep in mind that it's his story, and it's important for us to keep in mind that it's a sweeping, epic story. If you're a young person here this weekend and you're like, can we go back to the awesome music? Can that guy go away? You will watch all 18 Lord of the Rings or Harry Potters. This is a bigger and better epic. In the book of Samuel, in fact, I think I put it on emotional media this week. It's a story of prophets, kings, giants, and witches. It's going to be awesome. You guys fired up at all? Sorry, I'm fired up. I might go a long time. I'm just saying. I'm 6 feet apart. It's legal. Last thing, as we start to look at the last judge, is the big epic story has a personal piece to it. Because it starts big in this sweeping, when is the promise? When is the covenant? Where is all this blessing through all nations, through the sons and daughters of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Well, we're getting there. God's telling his story, and he's just kind of unwrapping or unfolding the story at his pace, by the way. But in chapter 1 of 1 Samuel, it zooms in to a family. And it gets really personal. You'll see that the last thing it said in the book of Judges, I'll just put that up on the screen real quick. The last verse of the book of Judges, Judges chapter 21, verse 25, it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." And that is exactly where we're at when we start in 1 Samuel, verse 1. Same place, same chronology. There was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And we know nothing's changed. 2020, when everyone does what's right in their own eyes, what do we have? Chaos, pain, sin, death. So, if you have a Bible, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 1. Here we go. We'll take it a chunk at a time, and we'll see what God has for us. It says, "There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim, of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. He had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Now let's pause right there. A mentor told me long ago that it's very important when you read the Bible to read it with all of your senses, right? To read it with all of your senses. In fact, I was talking to Pastor Britton this week, and he reminded me of another thing that guy said, is he said, the Bible's not boring, you are. The Bible's not boring, you are, right? It's because we don't apply ourselves to it. And so when we try to picture it and we use all of our senses, it's like imagine where they're at. Google a picture of Shiloh. Imagine the place, imagine the time, understand the events. Try to put yourself in their shoes to a certain extent so you can understand why this is significant. And we believe at the Tabernacle there's no wasted words in Scripture, so let's get after it. It's interesting. It starts, there was a certain man. It wasn't a special man. It wasn't a gifted man. He wasn't necessarily a holy man. He's somewhat of a worshiper of God or of Yahweh because he's going to Shiloh, which is a holy place. That's where they had the tabernacle set up, the tent of meeting where the Ark of the Covenant and the priests were, and that's where you'd make your sacrifices. And all of this is before the coming of Jesus. So this is the Old Testament, Old Covenant. It's pointing ahead, but that's what he did. And it says that this man had 2 wives. Which this is the perfect place for me to say, not everything in the Bible is prescriptive. This is descriptive. In other words, if you're not understanding the words that I'm using, he's not saying that's okay to do that. In fact, this is one of the ways that in Israel, men were doing what was right in their own eyes. You see, it was a big deal. Everything was attached to the land. And if I'm a man and I don't have sons, then my name and my land are going to pass to no one. Who's going to own this land? Who's going to run this land? Wives were caught up in it too. And in that culture, if you had children, you had value. And if you had no children, what's wrong with you? It's interesting that the author said that God had closed her womb. That's not a reference to God did something bad. It's affirming this idea, friends. And this is not even what we're talking about this weekend, but this is just for free. All life is given by God. There are no accidents. And when someone is blessed with a child, it's never a curse because it's God who makes life happen. It's not our mistakes. It's not our biology. It's not even our choice. So he has 2 wives. One's name is Hannah, and she was probably the first because that's the one that he's obviously in love with. But Hannah had no children. And this hurts her. It makes her sad because she wanted to have a child. I'm a man. I have 5 children. I don't know what it's like to be a woman and desperately want a child. But childlessness is something that we can relate to, some of us. And that desire, that need. Peninnah was probably the second wife. And she's popping out babies left and right. And in every case where you read of multiple wives in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, all you see is heartache and pain. Prove me wrong. There's never one of these Amazon Prime specials where some dude's a polygamist and everybody gets along. Doesn't happen that way. And what do we see? It says that Peninnah was like a rival and would irritate her and provoke her grievously. And can you imagine, it says that this goes on year by year, and they make an annual trip to offer sacrifices and worship God, and part of what they would do is whatever animal was sacrificed, some of it was given to God, some of it was given to the priests, and then the family would partake in the meal. This was called a peace offering. It's something you would do every year as a family, and every year when she's at that holy place. Can you imagine going to church once a year? Well, some of you can, sorry. Probably shouldn't have asked that out loud. Once a year is when they got to go, and that's where the prayers and the offerings and the festival, and it says it went on year after year after year. Friend, you may not be a woman who's suffering with childlessness, but has there ever been something that's provoked or irritated you? You ever had an enemy situation, and it's year after year after year? And then last thing on this section right here, here's Elkanah. Men, if there's ever a dude who doesn't get it, it's Elkanah. He may love her, he may give her a double portion, but to say to her, "Oh, Hannah, why do you weep? Aren't I more to you than 10 sons?" I have no doubt that Hannah loved Elkanah and Elkanah loved her. But what he probably should have said is, "Hannah, why are you sad? You are more to me than 10 sons." But year after year after year, this pain. Back to the book, verse 9. After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, "O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head." And as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, "How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you." Can you imagine that in church? Pastor totally misses it. But Hannah answered, "No, my Lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I've been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation." Then Eli answered, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him." And she said, "Let your servant find favor in your eyes." Then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. So if we're going to read this with all of our senses, our eyes, our ears, and we're to use our imaginations, she's finding a place in the temple courts where she can pour out her heart to God, away from the family, can't even eat. It's year after year, and we don't know, is it 5 years, is it 10 years? Peninnah had at least 5 children at that time, so it had to have been at least a decade, maybe longer. And so here she is, and again, she's pouring out her heart, it says, with great anxiety and vexation. Tears flowing down her cheeks. She's not even saying it out loud. Elkanah doesn't get it, and now Eli doesn't get it. A priest sitting in his chair, just watching over the place. Who's this drunk lady? And it's interesting because it's a time in Israel where everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes, of great sin, of great depravity, of great darkness. He didn't even see a humble woman coming to God in faith. He just assumed she was drunk. "Hey lady, why, how long are you going to come here? Put the booze away. Don't come drunk to church." She's like, "No, can't you see I'm pouring out my heart to God? I'm not a worthless woman. That's not who I am. But even in that, it's not argumentative. She's so humble. Eli here says a blessing, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition. And she says to the priest, who totally misjudged her, let me find favor and let your servant find favor in your eyes. The same way she came to God is the same way in humility she treats the high priest, Eli. Now, one thing that we need to understand is Hannah was not trying to make a deal with God. Some of us will see this because you know the story, you know what's going to happen. She said, if you will give me a son, I will give him back to you, and no razor will ever touch his head. Well, notice what she didn't say. She said, if you will give me a son, this is what I will do. She didn't say, if you don't give me a son, then I'm going to worship Baal. That's a deal. She's not trying to blackmail God. She's not saying you better. She's bringing a humble petition to God. Would you grant me a child? And if it's a son, I'll give that child to God. And when she says, no razor will touch his head, get this, that's a Nazirite vow. That means he will be consecrated or dedicated unto the Lord. And she says, forever. Forever. It's not a selfish prayer. I've got 5 kids. 3.5 of them still live in my house. The half is the college kid. And the married one, well, yeah, she's always there too, with the son-in-law. I don't want to give any of them away forever. I'd like them eventually to move out of my basement. But here's a mom desperate for a child who's saying he'll be consecrated, he'll be dedicated to the Lord. I'll give him back. So verse 19. They rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah, and Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. Verse 21, the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. And she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, oh, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. And that's Samuel chapter 1. This is God's word. And this story sets up the rest of 1st and 2nd Samuel, because Samuel is the last judge. Samson didn't accomplish what he was supposed to accomplish. He left Israel in a place where everyone was still doing what was right in their own eyes. Some people will say, well, Samuel tells us how God first raised up kings. And that's important because we have to have kings, because from the line of kings would come the King of Kings, the Son of David, Jesus the Christ. And so that's why this is important. Because Samuel's going to be the judge. He's going to be the prophet that's going to anoint the king that will be David. And from his line will come Jesus. But before we get to that part of the epic, we look at this incredibly personal story of a barren woman who, with anguish and tears and anxiety, pours out her heart to God and says, if you will give me a son, I will give him back to you. When it says that they left Shiloh and it says that Elkanah knew her, that means in the most physical, intimate sense in marriage. And it was God who opened her womb and granted her a son. And when she named him Samuel, do you know what Samuel means? It means God heard. God heard. But stop for a second. If we're going to read the Bible with all of our senses, how many childish or childless women prayed the same prayer in Israel that year? How many childless women over the centuries had prayed, give me a son. Meet me in my situation. I'm distressed. Heal me. Use me. Help me. How many slaves died in bondage? How many spouses died in an abusive situation that they couldn't get out of? How many children never had parents and grew up as orphans? And they poured out their prayers. Why this one? Why this one? And what does it mean when it says in verse 19, and the Lord remembered her? Did he forget? Was there something so special about Hannah that God listened to her and no one else? That's not the case. When it says that the Lord remembered, God never forgets. If you're here this weekend and this is the first time you're trying church out, the only thing that God forgets is your sin. When you trust Jesus and what he did for you on the cross, God will choose to forget that, but everything else God remembers. When he says, I'll remove your sin as far as the east is from the west, that is a promise. But when it says that the Lord remembered her, what that means is that he acted in accordance with his covenant promises. He acted in accordance with the purpose that he had. And the purpose that he had in human history is to bring about his glory. The purpose of human history is to bring about his glory through our redemption, to send us his son Jesus. And this Old Testament unfolding story, Jesus is still the hero. And so God's purpose and plan is this one who will commit this child that I will give her to me from a very young age. This one, I grant this petition and this promise. And Hannah could have had no way of knowing any of that. She knows now. Home with the Lord, she knows now, but she didn't know then. She just wanted a child and a humble heart that cried out in her distress, give me a son, and if you'll give me a son, I'll give him back. If we put ourselves in her shoes, after the child is born and his name's Samuel, she decides, I'll give him to the priest when he's weaned. Do you know how old that was? We don't know exactly. It's somewhere between 2 and 5 years. Can you imagine bringing your 5-year-old child to the priest and saying, I promised. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? The one who prayed? You thought I was drunk? God did it. He gave me a son. He remembered me, and now I remember what I said to him. No razor should ever touch his head. He's going to have a big old beard, and he's going to look like a prophet. And there's a whole bunch of other things that go with the Nazarite, someone that's consecrated to God. That's not what this message is about. You can look it up. Go to gotquestions.org. It'll explain it to you. But he's going to be a Nazarite. And can you imagine that moment? Friends, some of us, when Tab Kids is on, we can't leave our kids in a nursery for an hour. By the way, they're still welcome with us. I mean, they're always welcome with us. But, sorry, I'm going to get in trouble here. But some of us can't, out of sight, the helicopter mom. Can you imagine being the mom that says, I'm trusting God and I'm trusting this priest. Here's my son. I said I would do it and I would do it. And her exact words were, I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. It doesn't mean she loaned him, that she was going to take him back. It doesn't mean he was put out for rent. This is an old word. And it means I have given him back to God, consecrated, dedicated. He's my kid. And you'll see, she comes and visits him once a year. He gets a new shirt, a new robe once a year. She gets to see her boy. And you'll find out that Hannah was blessed with other children, but she didn't know that. She didn't know that when she gave him to God. And the last verse just jumped off the page to me, and it says, and he worshiped the Lord there. He worshiped the Lord there. Now, there's a lot of different directions we could go with this text. And I hope I haven't bored you. I love all the details. I had to decide. We could have talked about parenting. The best thing you could ever do is give your child to the Lord. But we don't want them here. Don't drop your 5-year-olds off, okay? That's not what I meant. But some of us have consecrated our children to basketball, to sports. We've consecrated our children to academics, consecrated our children to being accepted with the right fashion and all the right toys. The most important thing you can do is consecrate your children to God. I know some of you think I have false motives here, but I believe the weekend worship service is the most important family event, period. When a little child like Samuel, holding his dad's hand, he looks up at his dad at this church or some church, singing his guts out for Jesus. Kids see that, and they remember. And they're molded and they're shaped by that. When a child sees mom in her service, in her commitment, that it's not just when she feels like it. And when they see that that's important, that's a different sermon. Sorry. We could make it all about prayer. But I don't believe this text is simply teaching us that, if you cry and you really pour your heart out and you pray in a manner that people think you're drunk, then God will hear. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. In fact, I think the first thing for us to remember is simply this, and this goes all throughout this Samuel series. In fact, all throughout as you study this book with us on a weekend, on your own, at one of our ministry programs, whether it's at Foundry or in Tab Kids or with a women's group, it doesn't matter, Fight Club, wherever. Don't forget this. Don't forget this. The Bible's not about you. The Bible's not about you. It's not. It's not a manual to make your marriage work. It's not a manual to how to be prosperous. It's not a manual of how to be a good person. Good people are going to hell and will be in hell. Good people. Sorry about you. It's only by grace that we're saved through faith. In the story of the Bible is about Jesus. He's the hero of the story. Everything in the Old Testament is pointing to him. It's unfolding the story of the coming Messiah, and everything in the New Testament is about him. It points backwards to him. And the gospel is the epic of his story, right? So the Bible's about Jesus. The Bible's not about you. So you're not Hannah in the story. I'm not Eli in the story. You drunk? Sorry, I was trying to point at a chair and I pointed at a lady. I feel, Manistee, you do what you do. So the Bible's not about you. Now, thank God, because it's about Jesus, there's redemption for us. But there's layers here. And if you've read the Bible, you see those layers. You see, this story is familiar. How many barren women have we read about in the Bible? Do you remember Abraham? The one that God made the promises to? I'm going to bless all the nations through your offspring. Yeah, but I'm 100 years old, and so is my wife. She's 99, and we've had no kids. And then God granted them a child, a miracle baby. What about Zechariah and Elizabeth? Do you remember that story? It's how it begins in Luke. There was a high priest, and it was his year to serve. And he was married to Elizabeth, the cousin of a woman named Mary. And she was barren. And then an angel appeared and said, there's going to be a miracle baby. And you know what else? He's going to be consecrated to the Lord. Is this starting to sound familiar? You see, in the Bible, there's all these layers all the time. God tells the story and retells the story and retells the story so we see it. So this priest, Zechariah, and his wife Elizabeth, they have a son and they're told to give his name John. And what was John's job? To prepare the way for the King of Kings. And he was the prophet that Jesus said there's no greater prophet than John. Because he prepared the way for Jesus the King. He baptized Jesus, right? We're going to see in a couple weeks, Samuel. He anoints a king too. There's these layers of the story. God's telling us the gospel story. Jesus is in this story because it's from Samuel that we're going to get the king, that from his line we're going to get Jesus. You get excited about that? But it's important to remember the Bible's not about you. That's why, if there's some dude, hey, I'm going to go get me a couple of wives. No, sorry about bro, that's jail time. Yeah, and that's trouble. No, it's not prescriptive. It's not what you should do. It's descriptive. It's what they did. It wasn't necessarily right. But God in his grace still gave a child. Still gave a child. And, he gets some points there because when she said, I'm going to wait till he's weaned, he said, may the Lord establish his word. That means may God's will be done. What he says should come to pass is going to come to pass. So that's helpful for us to remember that the Bible's not about you. It went away. I don't know where it went. Yeah. Here's the second thing. And I think this is more personal for us. More personal for us. And that's this. God sees. God hears. God cares. And God remembers. Do you believe that? Yes, he's telling this big story, and Jesus is the hero of the story. I'm not the hero. Tabernacle's not the hero. You're not the hero. I'm not David. My troubles aren't Goliath. The Bible's not about you. But God sees. God hears. God cares. And God remembers. I don't know the situation of every single person who's here. Married, divorced, single, want to get married, wish you never got married. Parents, no parents. Young, old, student, doesn't matter. Whatever situation that you're in. What we know about God's nature, what we know about God's character, all of this is true. He sees you. He sees you. He saw Hannah. He saw her tears. He saw the provocation. He saw that Peninnah, and I don't know what her wounds were. It's not like she's just some evil woman. She knows that Elkanah loves Hannah more. She always gets 2 steaks and she only gets 1. She got a double portion. Well, I got kids at least. And you know how ladies can be. Not our ladies. Is she going to wear that? You know it's true. You know it's true. Let's just talk to the lady. You don't like each other. Not really. Can you imagine? Yeah, don't imagine it. Okay. But God sees your situation. God hears your cries. God hears every prayer. Out loud prayers, prayers in the heart. Prayers where there's weeping, prayers where there's distress. And sometimes prayers go year after year after year, and there's no answer. You thought you were the only one. You thought you were first. That's the human condition. And God's not being mean, but He has a purpose and He has a plan. And some of those purposes and some of those plans we won't see this side of heaven. I don't know why some requests don't get answered. I don't know why some of us have to hear the word cancer. I don't know why Sometimes one or the other says, I don't love you, I never loved you, I'm leaving. I don't know why the miscarriage. I don't know why the abuse. I don't know why sometimes people in 8th grade are just horrible to each other. I don't know why people have to use social media as a weapon to hurt other people. But I know that God sees. And I know that God hears. And as He is a God of love and mercy and grace and compassion, where it says in the Psalms, He collects every tear, every human tear, He collects in a bottle. I know that He cares. And when you don't trust His hand, what's the Christian ghetto cliche? Or when you can't see His hand, trust His heart, you can know that He cares. Know that He cares. And when God remembered Hannah, it's because He had a purpose and He had a plan. God sees. God hears. God cares. And God remembers. Scripture says, he who honors me, I will also honor. That's a promise. That's a promise. And you may honor God at your job, or honor God on your soccer team, or honor God at your school, or honor God in your neighborhood. And your honoring of God, some people may never, ever, ever see. God sees. God sees. You may sing off key. You may be the worst. God hears. You may think that you matter to no one. God cares. You may wonder, has your life meant anything? He remembers. He remembers. So you can pour out your prayers to God. It says in 1 Peter, cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. He cares for you. This is going to be a good series. Would you bow your heads with me? I don't know what situation you need to know for sure that God sees you in. I don't know what prayer you've prayed where you're desperate to know that He hears. Maybe you just needed to be here this weekend to hear again that God cares for you, that He loves you. Scripture says He loved us so much, He gave His Son to die on a cross. We know that He cares. We can know that He remembers. In these moments, would you pour your hearts out to God? Whatever it is. God in heaven, would you hear the prayers of your people?